Hello, LinkedIn. Welcome to another episode of Prospective Force Live. And we are going to be talking about legacy today. And as you can see, it's just going to be Anton and I today. So we'll do our best to hold up the balance as we can. But we can assure you that we will be sharing with you with good insight about legacy, and we really look forward to hearing from you. Please type in comments where you're joining from, and also engage with us with questions and comments. So, Anton, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. Sorry, turn this volume down. Looks like it's working on both my channel. I gotta check your. Did you check your channel? See if you're live on yours.
I'm going there now.
Okay, just make sure we're all good. But hey, guys, it's an interesting one today. We're going to talk about legacy, and legacy is a really broad term. So we're going to take a few different angles at it today. But really, I'm enjoying this topic today because it's not what you typically talk about when it comes down to stress management. It's not a topic that, you'll come into a stress management workshop, coaching, whatever it may be. And the person's going to say, well, your legacy is stressing you out, but it can. It absolutely does. And more importantly, it's lack thereof that usually stresses people out. It's not the actual legacy you're working on and the work you're putting in. It's sitting there and thinking about it and going, I should be doing more, but I'm not. And it's eating at me, right? I believe, and I think, Kevin, you probably agree, we are creatures that are meant to have purpose, right? And we live in this really tough existential existence of being really small in a grand scheme of things. And sometimes that's hard to live with. But sometimes when you use the skills, the opportunities, whatever that you have to help those around you and to really make an imprint, we call it footprints, to really leave your footprints behind, that can really create that sense of purpose that creates resilience for you. When life isn't going well per se, or maybe job is not going well, and you look around at your legacy, you look at the things that your kids are doing, you're looking at the things that your friends are doing because you've helped them through some things, you're seeing how you're impacting the community, you're seeing how you're creating an impact on the world. All of a sudden you go, this is temporary. Whatever I'm dealing with right now is really small because I'm doing all these big things and they're really working. And on the other hand, is people that don't have that, and small things go wrong. They have nothing to fall back on. And then small things go wrong. And then they have already this pressure in the back of their mind constantly going, you have to do more to leave an imprint on this world. You don't want to be on your deathbed going, I wish I impacted more lives. So that's kind of what we're talking about today.
So, Anton, this is the one that for a lot of us early in our journey kind of just stirs around in the background. And yes, it does create challenges and stress that we don't consider because legacy is long-term down the road. And while we are there, we don't think a whole lot about it. And then when something happens, a crisis, or as we age, all of a sudden this pops up and we're going, wow, what about this? And it's when we, one of the common events in life, especially it seems for men, is what we call a midlife crisis. And I think that's part of what we're dealing with, is the fact that at this point we realize that that our legacy is just either non-existent or not what we want it to be, and it gets our attention. Welcome, Raj. Oh my goodness, I'm going to do my best with your name, Rajashikar. I appreciate you being here today. If I mispronounce your name, please forgive me and help me. Maybe you can type it in phonetically so that we can get it right, but we're glad to have you with us today.
Yeah, guys. So, like I said, it's not a common one. It's not a typical issue that we discuss, but here's some key things that we'll cover today. We'll talk about, I thought I changed the agenda. I
Is
could have
this last
sworn I
week?
changed the agenda. Must have not saved. Go ahead and click the next slide. I hope this is the right deck. Click the next one. Yeah, okay, perfect. That's fine. Well, I know I changed the agenda. I must have not hit save. But so today we're going to talk about legacy, but we'll talk about all the components. But first, we'll dive into HR news article of the week. So every week we try to focus on some things. Kev will probably zoom in because he's a master of technology here, so you guys can see the words a little bit better. But what do you put on your resume? And I thought this was interesting because I've been talking a lot about emotion this week. A few posts on, just how we're doing with emotion, and a few things from, that we become overly emotional society. That's my take. That's just my opinion, guys. I did a poll, and luckily the poll confirmed what I said. I asked, are we balanced as a society between logic and emotion? Are we overly logical, or are we overly emotional? And I've had, I think, 150 people answer so far since yesterday. And it is 80% answering we're too emotional. That's not what it seems like in the media. That's not what it seems like around us. Everybody's pushing for more emotion. Be more vulnerable. Be more this. Speak about your authentic self, whatever the thing is. And guys, there's a time and a place for that. But the reality is we did that in 2000s. That's when we pushed hard for that, because we were coming out of this rigid, logic-driven corporate environment that wasn't fitting anybody. But then we pushed it for 20 years. We've been pushing to be more emotional and focusing on emotion, and we've over-indexed like we do everything else, and we've gone too heavy into this. And resumes are not any different. So when you look at these words, the article was talking about all these words make you feel warm and fuzzy inside. They make you feel warm and fuzzy about yourself. They don't necessarily connect the hiring manager to the actions that you've made. They need to be logical. These people, they're not reading emotionally. They're going, does this person logically make sense for my company, for the position that they have, for the opportunity at hand, whatever it may be? And the reality is all words you see on there don't describe squat. They're not specific. They're just emotionally charged words. So instead, we should be focusing on different types of words. Switch over to the next one, Kev, because the second, click it again, and it'll be the second set of words. And this article talks about how now we need to shift away from descriptive things to more focusing on words that are going to be talking about our actual accomplishments, right? So when you look at words hiring managers want to see, they're going to be words like achieved, managed, influenced. Notice that they are in past tense and they're action driven. That's what people want to see. That's what should be on your resume, is these kind of words instead of what you saw on the other. Guess what? They also have an emotional connotation to it, but not the kind that is going to just make somebody feel something. They're going to make them act on you as a candidate. So take a look at these words. And when you think about what you're putting on a resume, scan your resume and see if it's full of these words or the words that we talked about in the past. So Kev, what are your thoughts about difference between, the last emotional descriptions versus these actionable verbs?
See, I think you were hit on it earlier, and it is a key. It is balance. And these words are action, but they have emotion associated with it. So it's not just purely logic without any consideration of emotion. Influenced, for example, you cannot just mechanically influence people. That requires a total investment. And negotiated, again, you don't just do that purely logically and be effective. So I think the key is balance. All of us need to be able to, at any given point, lean more emotional or lean more logical. And I agree with you that we have definitely allowed our culture to become more emotionally based and driven, and it affects our decisions, and it affects how we present ourselves. We're presenting ourselves emotionally, and I think we have, I believe very much in the importance of empathy without any doubt, but I think we have, as you said, over-indexed on it, and it's creating some challenges that we need to be aware of. So.
Yeah,
And by the
I like
way,
that you
well,
mentioned balance, Kev, because I mean that's something I want to be always clear on. I tend to push against society. That's my thing. Like when I first came out of the military and even a little bit in the military, I realized we needed more emotion. We needed to be more human, especially in the military. So I was the guy that was asking for more emotion. I was the guy that was really pushing for it. But now I'm looking and I'm like, there's just already a lot of people doing that. I feel like I try to be the balance, and I don't mind wearing the bad guy hat from time to time. That seems like, oh, he's all about logic and doesn't care, guys. I care. I deeply care about emotion. I just understand the fact that your emotion is unique to you. No matter what happens, two people are always going to have differences in emotion, and it's tough to align and have a conversation around it to actually discuss things. And that's the problem that I'm seeing in our society. We can't have good discussions because everybody keeps bringing their emotions into it. I'm like, but that's unique to you. I cannot base my my feelings, my beliefs on your emotions, because they will change tomorrow and they will change the day after, and they're different from mine. So we have to have logic as the center of conversation. But we're diverging a little bit. Coming back to these words is just find balance, right? If you're going to put some emotional stuff in there, it's fine. But make sure you're not doing too much of it, because what ends up happening is you put words on resumes that don't matter. And you're putting things in a very valuable space, some really expensive real estate, that is just being empty words. And make sure they're actionable, like you see on the screen. Shout out to Joanne from Manchester, UK. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, and Jander is joined us also. So glad to have Jander here.
But yeah, let's get into the presentation. I just wanted to kind of go over this. This was interesting to me because I'm mentoring this kid right now, or student. And it's funny. I think I'm getting older.
Welcome to my world.
But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that we talk about. I'm like, he wants to talk about his hobbies and things like that. If that hobby connects to the job, go ahead for it. If it doesn't, I'm telling you, like, I don't say this to be boastful. I've hired over 100 people in my life, so I've looked at a lot of resumes. And I'm telling you, I scan that thing within a minute to look for things that connect to what I'm looking for. Then maybe when I get into detail, I have more time, I may look into it. But the reality is I'm going to get that from the interview more than I'm going to get that from your resume. That's where I'm going to look for personality and emotional, that kind of stuff. I can't get that from a piece of paper anyway. But let's get into the first.
Anton, real quick. One of the things, again, we try to be practical with what we offer, and what I encourage folks, in order to, the challenge in balance is to find our balance, okay, and not base it on what others say is balance, and because anything we do that's based purely on what someone else says is right or wrong, or the priority, is dangerous. We need to learn how to find a balance in our life so that we can live it. And I suggest to people that it is a good idea to go, when you're going through some of these concepts, disconnect. Okay, let go of stuff that's that's distracting you, because if you're looking for a job, getting this right on your resume is not so much a right format as it rightfully represents you in a way that people will understand you. So disconnect from distractions and take time observing yourself internally, externally, and also through the eyes of people that you trust around you, and then begin to figure out what you need to get on your resume. Such a critical piece. Again, I remember I've done some posts related to resumes and job seeking, and it always amused me. I would suggest something outside the norm to people. I'd say, well, at one point, it was a no-no to have hobbies and things like that on your resume. I don't know if that's still a no-no or not, but people would come and say, well, I'm not getting noticed. And I would say, well, try this. And they would say, well, the experts say, and I come back and say, well, how's that working for you? If it was working for you, you wouldn't be here asking questions. So, consider doing something that the experts don't say if it reflects you well and reflects you accurately. But you have to know you, and a lot of us don't. That's an underlying problem. We are trying to be what we think others want us to be, and when it comes to job seeking and stuff, it's a big mistake, because what I've seen personally happen is people get into their career 10, 20 years, and and it's good that we're talking about legacy, because they do that and they get in there and they go, oh my, this is just not where I wanted to be, intended to be. And so really take this to heart, really something to consider.
I love when you talk, man. Whenever you talk, I don't think I have another person in my life that gives me as many visuals when I listen to them. And we've talked about this, you and me, before, and maybe on a show, I don't know, but balance is a different thing in a different situation. It's not about finding this perfect spot and maintaining it.
Right.
It's shifting balance. And I always think about, like, I've been skiing a lot. So I've been, winter, been getting up in the mountains a lot. The way that my body's balanced on a steep hill or a downhill is different than it is on flat ground. On some of these, I may be leaning way forward. On some of these, I'm leaning back in order to maintain that balance because of the external environment. And that's kind of what, Kevin, I'm assuming you're getting at, is adjust your balance based on the environment that you're in within the constraints of who you are. Obviously, you're never going to try to go beyond your limitations or within what you see as acceptable, but then it shifts. Sometimes you need more emotion. Sometimes you need more logic. But this thing that we keep trying to do, and I love that you constantly remind me about balance, we think that it's one or the other. We constantly keep trying to go more this, more that, which is kind of what I'm guilty of, a little bit over this week and the things that I'm talking about. But that's only because I'm realizing that I need just way more people on that side. So like I said, I don't mind being the bad guy, but just visualize that hill. Visualize yourself on a hill or downhill, and think about how you have to adjust your balance based on that external environment.
It's a great analogy, Anton. I've continued to try to figure out a good visual for it, but skiing is one of them. You always have to be on your skis. You can't, if you get off your skis, you got a whole other set of problems. But either left leg lean, right leg, lean forward, backwards, but you're always on your skis. And if you can are only able to lean backwards, you're in trouble going downhill, because you're going to end up on your backside. And so, yeah, it's a great analogy of what balance is really about. And we don't need to be looking for that ideal middle, because old saying was that a man who walks down middle of road gets hit by traffic both directions.
Yeah, that's a good one. And leaders have to adjust that. I think when you're a leader, it's a little bit more on you to, we talk about team dynamics, being a thermostat for your team, adjusting based on team temperature. And you may need to be less emotional if you have a lot of emotional people on your team thinking that way. And I don't mean that in less emotional as you don't accommodate their emotions, but I'm just saying, if there's already a lot of people thinking that way, the first thing to think about is people's emotions, things like that. Then you may need to be more logical and think about, are these people making the money that they need to make to survive? Or vice versa, if you have a lot of people, your support, your downline leadership or whoever around you is much more logical, then you need to be a little bit more emotional and thinking that first to find that balance. Because we ultimately want, in a conversation, leadership decisions and things like that, to all cards to be on the table and all good decisions to be, all good options to be there before we can make that decision. So as a leader, this is also adjusting to your team within constraints of yourself.
And my favorite definition of balance is having a firm grip on both extremes and being able to move towards either one or the other in a given moment. And as a leader, that's, the term we would call that is agility, the ability initially to be stone cold logical, but then it might only be minutes that you then have to switch gears and lean into the emotional aspect. And that's where the art form of leadership comes in. And it's also why, one of my favorite topics going on now in perpetuity is going to be wisdom. Because if you don't gain wisdom on how to make those shifts, you're going to be in trouble. Your timing will be off in how you respond. And that really can create a lot of difficulty.
Mhm. And guys, you see the picture on here. It's one that we often talk about because we're really driving the point home of your workplace is an ecosystem. Your workplace is this contained one-way valve type of thing that allows stress to come in, but unless there's something done about it, it doesn't go away, right? And in these buckets, they represent capacities for stress. Small buckets are your individual team members. The big buckets below the tree are your, big team capacity. And the reality is it circulates. It's just like an ecosystem. Water downpours, absorbs into the ground, evaporates in the sky, and then does it again. Well, that cycle occurs over and over in your organization without stress escaping unless you're doing something about it. But here's the reality. Stress is always constantly being brought in because external stress outside of your environment, outside of your company is also impacting your people. So they may be having life problems. And I just played this out, right? Say I'm having really hard time with my wife and I'm fighting with her all the time. I'm in a bad mood. I'm on edge. I'm irritable. I'm coming to work. The work may be just fine. Everything's at work is fine. But now I am acting the way that I am because of the stress at home. Do you think that's adding work stress? Absolutely. Because whether I'm a leader or not, I'm impacting those people around me. And it's like a ripple effect in a pond. You throw a rock in the pond and it ripples way down, away from where it happened. Well, the same thing happens with stress. That individual comes in and now they're impacting the team that they're on. Now they overflow the team bucket because they're, kind of a pain in the butt and they're irritable, especially if they're a leader. Now that team misses a deadline because for some reason things didn't go as well. They had to play a lot of, I had to take a lot of time to fix relational problems that I've created because of my stress. And now that team is deadline, all of a sudden the organization is behind the deadline. So what happens then? Now that rain downpours harder on everybody. Now everything gets tighter. Pressure gets put on everybody in organization because of this missed deadline. So now there's more stress without it being let go. And guess what? People outside are still having problems. So it's like just gets into this really, really vicious cycle and then it keeps going. So in order to get rid of it, you have to be intentional about offloading it and custom tailoring how you offload it for teams and each individual in your organization.
Got to be able to get to a point that you have figured out ways to help your team members drain their stress, okay, and manage it. Sometimes it's not about draining it. Sometimes it's about considering inflow. And then what a leader has to do is also to be able to manage and figure out flow and maintaining levels of stress related to the team as well as themselves. So that's one of the challenges of being a leader of other people. And I tell leaders when I train them, it is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but it's one of the most blessed and fulfilling things you can ever do.
And I like your point on changing up. It's not always about getting rid of stress. Sometimes that won't happen. We talk about this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Stress is meant to be part of our organizational behavior. There's three options, really, and continue looking at this as, audience, from a bucket analogy. I can stop the water from flowing into the bucket or reduce that flow. That's what most people think about, right? Stopping the stress or reducing the stress. Sometimes it's not feasible. I can also take that water out. Consciously, intentionally do something to offload some of the stress, recovery practices, right? Things that'll recover our bodies, our minds, our spirits, things like that, our teams. But also I can work on the capacity, the size of my bucket. Those are the three things. That's resilience, building resilience ahead of time. And before stress becomes bad or even after, it doesn't matter. You're expanding your bucket's capacity, which means I can take a lot more stress on without it overflowing. And as long as your stress is not overflowing, you're fine. That's why some of these people in the world can take massive amounts of stress, massive, and they keep going. Nothing phases them. Don't get me wrong, guys. If somebody doesn't take care of them with time, that capacity will reduce and they will not be as good. But you compare it to them and you go, wow, I can't ever do that. You can if you build your capacity. You can if you start doing these things properly. They just had resilience for whatever reason, be it nature, nurture, who knows. But understand that. Stop the water or reduce the water. Sometimes feasible, sometimes not. Offload the water based on team members and teams. Once again, sometimes feasible, sometimes not, based on, how much time we have, how much resources and things like that, or expand the capacity. And depending on your individual team, depending on your individual situation, you have to figure out which of these inputs are best for me today and how do I adjust them moving forward? That's really stress management in a nutshell.
Right. And don't assume the outputs, the reliefs, the valves, if you will, in our picture, are all one size fits all. One of the common errors we're seeing in organizational ecosystems now is that the solution becomes a ping pong table or a yoga lesson or whatever. And that's supposed to make everything great for everybody. It doesn't work. There has to be options, and that's why it's such a value. And we pound on this a lot, and that is, as leaders, know your team. Real important. Know your team, because then you'll make priority decisions to meet the needs of your team as well as yourself, and not guess at it. And I've got to put a plug in here. People say, well, how can we avoid guessing at it? Well, we have just rolled out an assessment tool that we're offering to anyone that's interested that will begin to help you identify stress areas. And it's starts pretty simple, and then depending on the need, it can go deeper and deeper. And then ultimately, what we do is use that assessment to be able to come in to an individual or an organization and be able to evaluate and help them develop this organizational ecosystem so that it is balanced, so that stress is at proper levels as much as possible. And I will tell you, we're not going to come in and give you a program. If we were going to give you a program, we can put that in a PowerPoint and an article and send it to you. And the problem is, what we've seen is the effectiveness is limited. And my feeling is, when we do things like that, that probably the effectiveness rate's about 30%. And that leaves out about 70% of your people going, well, that worked for them, but what about me? So that's what we avoid doing. We want to make sure that when we come in, that we're addressing needs and concerns of based on the needs of that person or your team.
We're so synced up, man. I love it. Like, I've been working with this guy for, I don't know, 3 years now. Literally right before he started talking, I'm like, well, Kevin, how do we find out what this team stuff is for our people? And you went straight there. No, I love it, guys. Leaders, it's on you. I don't think I'm telling you anything new. Leadership is not a privilege, a responsibility. And stress has become one of the biggest things. If you're not aware of this yet, you will be soon. One of the biggest things that leaders have to manage. You know, and I say the word manage because we clearly make this and articulate this point. It doesn't mean always reduce. It's sometimes not feasible. Right. You know, I was doing a project right now and looking at stress management for hospital workers. You think it's really easy to reduce stress for hospital workers, especially your ICU and some of those really, really high stress? No. We have to approach it from the other standpoint. We have to fortify them, and we have to offload it when we can. We're not going to reduce the inflow because that's part of the job. So go and study, go take a look at this. Don't guess. There's no need. See where it is. But look at this tree, right? You're looking at this tree, and we talk about root causes all the time. Instead of giving your team member something that may marginally help them, figure out what's the biggest issue that they're having with stress. Fix that at the root of a tree. And then the branches, the leaves, everything will get better. But you can work on the leaves all you want. If the roots are rotting, it ain't gonna matter. So I'll give you this in a live example. So I've seen this way too many times, and I have countless examples of this, but imagine you see your team is stressed. You guys are under a lot of mental stress, whatever it may be, and you go, okay, we need to start doing meditation hour, every week. Right? Whatever it may be, every day, doesn't matter. And you think, okay, this is going to help. And it may, it really will. I do believe that doing any form of meditation will have marginal improvement. But in comparison to what? That's always my question. That's always what comes next. You're offering this in comparison to what? So let's break this down. The reality is your team has been under a lot of stress for a long time. They've kind of calmed down. Their mental stress gotten a little bit better. but their digestion has gone to complete in the crapper. They're because when you're stressed, what actually happens, your body drives blood away from digestion into extremities. That's the physiological response. Whether it be stress because you're running from a lion, or it's stress because you're not getting enough sleep, or it's stress because you're on the phone too much or technology too much. It doesn't matter what the stress is. The body responds to it the same way because it's a chemical reaction. So now our digestion has gone down. So perhaps we develop leaky gut. Leaky gut is basically when you have, increased intestinal impermeability, your body starts seeping undigested food and bacteria into the bloodstream. And that causes all sorts of havoc. So here you are trying to meditate, and most of your stress now is coming from the gut. It ain't going to get fixed. It ain't going to do anything for that gut. We have to identify what are the foods that are causing poor responses, take them out, heal the stomach lining, and get the digestion back so that internal stress can stop happening. And that's what it's all about. It's figuring out which area. We have 12 different areas that we assess. 4 of them for life, 4 of them for health, and 4 of them for leadership. And we see which one of these is truly the root cause of everything. And the best thing to do is after that is sit down in a consultation with us to break it down so we can actually look at your history and say, okay, based on the things that have happened over 5 to 10 years, yes, your stress problems go that far back and symptoms may be finally showing up today. What it really started and what is perpetuating the cycle right now? Let's address those things. Instead of everything in the trees, everything in the leaves, we fix the roots, we heal the roots, and everything in the tree gets better.
Well, and for example, one of the other practices that we really key in on that makes a huge difference in the successful outcomes is if we identify that the root, for example, is lacking water. Okay, what happens, unfortunately, is rather than applying water at appropriate levels to rehydrate the root, we just bring in and dump water and dump water and dump water. And when you approach it that way, you ultimately end up setting up another problem with your roots because you over hydrate them and you create root rot. So again, when we talk about helping bring change, and one of the brand's concepts that we use is 10%. We're not going to come in and say, okay, for example, and I'm going to use a goofy example, but say wardrobe is your problem. Okay, one approach would be to take everything in your wardrobe and give it away, throw it away, whatever, and then go out and buy a whole new wardrobe. And that's foolish because most of us do not know do not have the money to do that and the time, and it is needs to be something done gradually to find that right balance rather than doing that crazy. So the goal here, and we'll always approach it, is let's take a bite and identify that bite, take a bite towards helping you overcome what the root problem is. And when we do it that way, that's sustainable. That, diets are a great example. Diets don't work because we throw everything out and do this new thing that we've never done before. And then it'll last, depending on how stubborn we are, it'll last anywhere from a week or 2 to maybe a few months. But ultimately, if it's not a part of our makeup, our design, you go off it, and then you're in worse shape in the next few months after that than you were to start with. So it's not a good plan to do this restart completely. It just doesn't work.
And like I said, I like the diet thing. I like to make this real for leaders or people, right? So here's how it goes. I've seen this too. You are coming in and you're thinking, I'm going to give nutritional guidance to my team. Once again, one size fits all because nutrition is important for everybody. And you don't consider the full picture, right? So imagine your team, and many of them are struggling with mental health. It's the mind stress that's really bad. They're having poor self-talk. They're feeling like failures. So what do? You bring in a diet expert that beats them up about all the bad things that they're doing, all the health problems they're creating by making the poor choices. What did you just do? You just put a lot more pressure on the shoulders of people that are already cracking under that pressure, right? There's parts of your team who absolutely needs that. But there's parts of your team who right now should not hear that, who should be hearing like, look, it's an 80-20% rule where we're trying to be good most of the time. Give yourself a break when you're not. Celebrate the wins, like more positive stuff. We don't need to hammer them and create more accountability for them. They're already cracking under the pressure. These people should be talking about mental health support, self-talk, whatever may be those things, organizing your life. That's the best bang for your investment for their time. It's not nutritional advice, but yet what do we do as organizational leaders? We find this great nutritionist and they're going to educate our team and it's going to be so much value, but we don't think how that value can actually be problematic down the road.
Yeah. And again, when you take the one size fits all, you're going to get about 30% result at best. Whereas if you learn your team and consider a variety of approaches, your performance response is going to be remarkably higher because you're dealing with those needs, not just throwing a new program at them.
Let's hit the next one. So, talking about family legacy, we'll talk about 5 different aspects of legacy we focus on. But, it's one of the things that we don't think a lot about consciously. But I promise you, in the back of your mind, if you have family, which most of us do, whether it be immediate family that was an offspring of yours, whether it be siblings, whether it be your parents, grandparents, whatever it may be, I promise you, in the back of your mind, there's a little voice saying, either I need to call them more, I need to spend more time with them, I need to help them more, whatever it is. I promise you, if you slow down and if you're not managing your family legacy, that little voice is constantly nagging. And come back to the bucket analogy, right? Everything may be fine, but it's a constant slow little drip that happens over time that you're not paying attention to. And the way chronic stress works, doesn't matter if it's pouring all at once or it's slow over time. If you're not dealing with it, the same outcome is going to come out of it, whether it all came at once or it slowly dripped in there. So think about your family. How are those people around you? How are you, impacting them? How are you helping them? How are you, creating a family that sometimes may be simple as I want a family, I don't have a family. And that's something that's eating at you. And I have a friend of mine, my best friend right now is dealing with that. For the longest time, it's been really hard on him that I have kids, I have a family, and, we're the same age. And he puts a lot of pressure and stress on him, like he's missing out. I'm 35. I haven't had kids yet. My window is closing, and it's so much pressure and stress on him, but he doesn't always realize that. We have to have long conversations to usually pull that out and say, dude, you realize that this is eating at you. Either A, go do something about it, or give yourself a break and realize you got plenty of time. This is not the, 1800s where our life expectancy was, way less than it is now.
Well, and we see this show up in the workforce all the time. And the common pattern is when we get into our career and we've already invested time, energy, money into a probably expensive education of some kind or another. And then we realize that when we made the decision to choose that particular career path, we didn't consider legacy. And we didn't consider, can I have a legacy that I want with this choice? And that's why you see very commonly that people get in their 30s, 40s, and they get to that point, that midlife point, and they go, oh my, this is not where I thought I would be. This is not what I thought would be going on in my life. And it goes back to considering legacy. And it will eat at you in the back of your mind, and it usually doesn't show up until you hit a crisis point. One of the things that right now with this pandemic that has caused a lot of fear in our lives is that we've been forced by the situation to consider our mortality. And a lot of people are going, I'm not ready. Now, whether they've given it that thought or not, but that's driving the fear. Oh my, if I get this virus and it kills me, what then? What have I been prepared? And a lot of people are facing that, and they're not even considering the root. They're thinking it's about a health question. I would suggest that it's not about a health question. It's about legacy. I'm not ready to die. I haven't considered it. I haven't prepared. And that's how this thing does. It just, like Anton says, it's that little bit of voice churning in the back of our minds all the time.
So consider this picture, right? You take a look at all the different generations on there and go ahead, flip to the next slide and ask yourself this statement or say this statement. I'm helping my family to live their best lives. Can you answer that full-heartedly with full confidence every day? And if you can't, start working on it. I'm not telling you that all of a sudden tomorrow you need to be perfect there, but you just identify an opportunity. You try to create awareness in your head consciously on what subconsciously is eating at you, and then stop it by putting actions forward. We talk about controllables and not controllables, and then you say, not all the things there are controllable, but what can I influence? What are the steps that I can do to start feeling like that is the statement that is true and start acting on it?
Very definitely. People talk about regrets, and I'll hold this true to be true for as long as I live, that we most of the time regret what we haven't done, not what we did. There are some people that make the exception to that because they've proven it. They did something, they go, uh-oh, I shouldn't have done that. But most of the time, when you get to a point where you're really looking back and considering it, oh, I wish I had called more. I wish I had talked more. I wish I had spent more time doing X, whatever those things are. And helping your family to enjoy their life is a big one. There is, because deep down inside, even in dysfunctional families, it's there. It's a part of who we are as being human. And it is that desire to have good family. And we can deny it, we can say whatever we want, but it's still true. And if you don't address it, it's going to gnaw. And it'll come back one day and you're going to say, oh, I wish I had.
Yep. Hit the next one. So next one's right. Friend supporter. It's something that people that are not necessarily our family, they're a distant family. Some of our friends become like our family, but just a different category of people, all the same concepts, right? Some of your friends are one step away from greatness. You could be that bridge. You could be that connection. You could be that opportunity. And we just don't do it enough. I feel like, and I think that stress does that. Stress puts us into comparison game. Stress makes us look at things with envy. That's just primitive nature. You know, that's what happens. Like when you give one monkey one banana, another monkey two bananas, they know the difference. They see that monkey got two bananas. And when we are under stress, we become more like that. We're not able to be humanly thinking, those two bananas are rotten. I got a nice, ripe, healthy banana. Like that's what a human logic does. But when we're like that, we start comparing against our friends. We start competing with our friends. We start having scarcity with our friends instead of an abundance mindset, realizing that if I help them, that doesn't mean that there's less for me. Their success does not diminish mine, or their success does not make my failure look worse. It's not how it works. We're not on the same scale. The only thing that's going to happen by you helping your friends is you're going to feel darn good about it because you're making that imprint. Through them, you're helping society. Through them, you're creating purpose. And it's just better. Stop trying to compete with your friends, because I think that's a very common thing that we started doing.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be difficult. One of the things that I've learned and I have found to be effective both for me and my friends is there's moments that someone that I haven't been in contact with recently will come to mind, and I'll just simply drop a text, DM them on LinkedIn, send them an email, just says, hey, you came to mind. I was thinking about you. I said a prayer for you. Hope you're doing well. And boom. And in addition to feeling satisfied in doing that, I have had so many occasions where people will come back and say, that was perfect timing. I needed that encouragement. I needed that word to be able to get through the day or to make a decision, whatever it is. And so don't make this hard, but do have it as part of what you do. It is going to be your legacy one day. probably some of the saddest situations is people that have funerals and nobody shows up because there are no friends. And that's truly sad. And the person involved likely regretted and lived long enough to regret it.
And we talked about this a few weeks back when we talked about relationships. But support for your friends means a different thing. It's kind of like when Kev talked about love languages, right? Some people may need physical support. Some may need material support. Some need time support. Some need some emotional support, right? Figure out what's the best way for them. Don't just deliver support in the best way you want to. See how they need that support, and don't just pat yourself on the back and say, "Oh, cool, I did this." No, think about how they need to receive it, and then be more strategic with it. But ask yourself, I help my friends reach their milestones on their life journey, right? Or I'm super competitive with my friends and I resent when they do that, right? That's what I feel like a lot of us are doing right now, but I don't blame you. That's what stress does. Stress makes our primitive brain much more overactive to where our logical brain doesn't. That's why some days you look at it and go, wow, I cannot believe I was jealous of that person. Or I cannot believe I wanted to sabotage them. Or I cannot believe I wanted to do that. Because you're in a clear state of mind at that point and you're going, logically, that made no sense. But in the moment, you felt like them succeeding is going to diminish me. Them performing well is going to diminish my performance. Whatever it may be, the wrong story because that primitive brain is overactive.
Well, and part of what we're talking about involves having considered these different components. And what you do with them becomes personal. How you build to it. But if you don't ever consider it, it doesn't go away. It doesn't disappear. You're ignoring these things doesn't relieve you of consequences from it.
So the next one, guys, world impact. I really like this picture. When I found this picture, I was like, oh, that's a really cool picture. But what's your impact on the world, right? There's just different components. And guys, it doesn't mean that you need to go and take a look at all these and go, okay, I got to go do all this at once. Kevin Anton said, I need these five areas of impact that I'm going to go and make a perfect plan for him. These are just considerations, right? We do believe that you should be making contributions in all of them. But if you're not in any of them, start with one. Start in one area that makes sense to you right now, that resonates with you, that speaks to you, that ignites your fire, your passion. Here I am talking about emotion. It does exist inside me. But, focus on that and then go for it. But how are you making an impact on the world? And this is the really big thing. This is where, me and Kevin will talk to you about vision. This is vision, because vision is so big. It's beyond what's in front of us, is beyond the next couple of years. I believe in 300-year visions. I believe in visions that are so big that they can't be accomplished in a lifetime, right? Do you have a vision like that? Do you have something you want to see happen in the world? And that can be whatever it be, whatever your skill, whatever your passions, whatever your thing. I promise you, the world needs more of it. And there's parts of the world that don't have any of it. And you can find ways to reach it and provide it, whether it be emotional, logical, product, service, doesn't matter. Some way, somehow you can do that. But then you feel great about it. Then you feel like you're not just some speck that is irrelevant. You feel like you're somewhere in that part of the world, but you matter because you create a difference for other people's lives.
We were talking about this yesterday in the live Wisdom Seeker live show about how that vision becomes an anchor. Part of the problem that we have currently is with the turmoil around us, we have no anchors in our life. And one of the anchors is our legacy, okay? And the question of world impact. What am I doing to bring positive effect? And am I keeping that in front of me? Is that a part of what I'm doing? Am I making decisions that line up with moving me towards that vision? And one of those is, what can I do for the bigger world? And when we can at least consider that, we go a long way. And most of us have a need to affect the bigger world one way or another. And the sooner we can understand it and identify it, we can then determine, are we actually dealing with it? Again, a lot of what we're talking about today is much about awareness to start with. And for some of you, the whole ticket here is not going to be to plan your legacy. It's going to be to become aware whether you are considering your legacy.
Mhm.
That may be your action step. So, yeah, world impact is important. But by the way, out of balance, if we're focused on world impact and all we do is see what we can't control and try to influence what we can't, guess what happens to our stress level? It goes out the roof. So again, the balance. And when we talk about all these different areas in terms of stress, in terms of health, it is about balancing all of these aspects. And first, you have to know where you are in regards to, and that's the value of assessing, is to find out where am I right now.
So ask yourself this statement, right? Or say this statement: I'm making a positive impact on the world. Can you say that confidently? Can you say that truthfully? And can you say that without making yourself feel icky, right? But if that's a word, but you know what I mean. You say, and it just doesn't sit right, right? Like if that's the case, create awareness, create what you can do different, create where you feel the gaps are. That's a lot of times, and it's interesting, right? Here's another concept to this, because some people are doing an amazing job. Some of you, to everything that we've talked about, you are leaving an imprint, you're leaving your positive footprints everywhere, but you don't feel like it. Because it's not because of anything, but your personal awareness around it. So when you're asking yourself these questions and making these statements, logically take a look at it. And don't try to let emotion play a factor here. This is where I separate the two. Actually list out the things that you're doing. List out the people that it's impacting and go, you know what? This is great. I am doing amazing. But yet my primitive mind is telling me, Anton, you're not enough. You're not doing enough. People don't like you. You're not creating a difference. That may not be the case. That's just the mood that I'm in that day. So sit down, logically list it out, create awareness like Kevin's talking about, and then you'll be a lot better off. I think we got one more.
And one of the concepts of balance here, I see some people making huge impacts on the world and their family is left languishing. Okay. Balance in all of this is key. You don't need to go extreme in any of these. Okay. Or not reside in that extreme. At moments, yeah. If you're involved in impacting the world in a way, you may go through a time that takes the greater priority. But if you do it in complete ignorance or ignoring of your family, you're going to find a problem. And by considering all of this, you can keep it in balance. This all becomes part of your vision that keeps you centered and coming back to the right place when you're seeking balance.
I love that, Kev. So the next one, community involvement. We got two left. It's similar to the world, but it's something that's more impactful and more immediate, right? The world takes a lot to impact, right? But the community around me doesn't take a lot. I personally volunteer and I mentor college students. I volunteer and I coach a soccer team for my little one. Those things are as much for them as they are for me, in all honesty, and I'm okay to say that. Part of it is selfishness because it makes me feel good about myself, but it's something that's very easy to control. In community involvement, I would say it's probably the easiest way to leave an impact because there's already defined channels. There's already defined pathways and very easy ways to get involved. Sometimes trying to impact the world, your family, your friends is tougher because you got to have some of these tough conversations and you have to create avenues. You have to discover avenues and create paths. Where in community, look around. You can throw a rock to so many ways that you can create a positive impact on your community. And in the process, make yourself feel better about yourself as a person. And there's nothing wrong with that, at least in my opinion. It's okay to do something for yourself when it serves others. I have no issue with that whatsoever.
It's an interesting one, and it's a favorite topic. I dealt with a young person before that was really wanting to make a very positive impact on the world, and particularly about sustainment and so on. And I found it interesting that I suggested to this young person then, okay, if you want to clean up the environment, for example, you're focused on doing that, and that's your choice. That's fine. We need to be good stewards. But I suggested to this young person, well, in that case, why don't you go to our next door neighbor who is elderly and help them clean up their yard, help them improve the environment? And I was just amazed. The question was, well, why would I do that? And I go, if you're trying to change the world, but you're not willing to invest in your own community, you're going to be mistaken. And when it comes time and you look at your legacy, you're going to say, oh, wow, I really missed it on this. So it's a part. You've got to have both parts. Yeah, change the world, that's wonderful. But start by changing the community around you. Because, like Anton said, the chances of me controlling or influencing the world are small. But the chances of me controlling or influencing the community around me are very large. And it becomes very doable. Now, the challenge is that it takes commitment, it takes responsibility to do that. And I think that's what scares a lot of people in this one.
Well, I talk a lot about this analogy, walking into, you're a brand new person that wants to take care of their health. And you're like, I heard that lifting weights in the gym is good for my health. So you come into the gym, you're not going to pick up 300 pounds and throw them over your head. So it's similarly, you're not going to impact the world if you never create an impact on a single life, right? So to Kevin's point, start small. Start small, start somewhere you can impact somebody right away, immediately. Then see how that makes you feel, learn from it, grow from it, also build confidence. If I can do that for one, I can do that for two. If you can do that for two, you can do that for 10. And with time, you can do it for the world. But you have to start somewhere. Great point, Kev. So I'm making a positive impact on my community. Can you say that truthfully, honestly, feel good about it, and not feel icky about it?
Well, and one of the things that I will maintain, again, this is, in my opinion, an absolute truth, is that way we change our world is to start a movement, okay? Rather than getting an organization together or getting government action, start a movement. If you look throughout history, the largest impacts on history was one person impacting another, and then each of them impacting another, and so on. And that became a sustainable concept, a sustainable effect that we feel still today. And so as we look at making an impact, focus on starting a movement, not creating a new organization, not creating any of that. Start with a movement, including, by the way, start with ourselves. Whatever it is, we need to make sure we start with ourselves and then approach it.
This last one's tough, guys. This last one hits hard if you really sit down and, do the exercise. I challenge just about anybody I work with client-wise that I involve with, whether it be leadership, life. I don't do so much with health, but anything on the other two categories. And I challenge them to write their own eulogy. I said, I want you to really think about this. I really want you to spend some time. And it's not an easy task. This is heavy. It's one of the heaviest things I ask any of my clients to do. And I just want you to ask yourself, how do you want to be remembered? But it's not even that. It's deeper than that. How do you want people to talk about you when you're no longer here? What that is, to me, the ultimate legacy that you leave behind is, how do people talk about you when you're gone? Whether it be 2 years, 10 years, 100 years, who knows, depending on the size of your impact. But sit down and write an eulogy. Think about all the important people that you would want to speak at your funeral. Who are those people? Why are they who they are? Why did you choose them? And then identify, how would you want those people to talk about? What kind of key things do you want them to mention? And then look and see, is the way that you want them to talk about then, would that be the way that you would talk about you now? And if that's not the case, if there is, misalignment, figure out how to fix that. Figure out what are the components that need to be done. Don't go change them overnight. Just identify. Like Kevin said, start with awareness, see what those gaps are, and then fill them in with the right actions today.
So ask yourself, or you address this statement to yourself. I currently live my life the way I want to be remembered. Can you confidently say without any doubt, yes, always? And if you say never, then this is something that's going to turn in the back of your mind and become a point of stress, and it'll show up. It's a matter of when.
So that's all we got for today, guys. We've been talking about this assessment, so just go to prospectiveforce.com. There's a quick 12-question assessment. That's a pre-assessment. We don't want to waste your time. If you're managing your stress well and you're doing a great job, which many people can be, you take the quick one and says thumbs up, high five, keep doing what you're doing. Take the assessment. It says either you're borderline and you're really doing bad. Take the full 60-question assessment that comes after it, and it'll identify to you by categories which category has the lowest score. At the end, it'll give you percentages. And if you scored in one of the categories really poorly, that's the one you go after. Don't worry about the rest. Start with the one that you're doing the worst in and really see how the rest will improve. Chances are it's one of the root causes that's impacting other things. And instead of chasing all of them at once, go to that root, take care of the root, and watch the tree, the stem itself and the leaves and the branches get better in the process.
Find the 10% that you can do, you need to do, and take that first bite. That's what it's about. And by the way, that this assessment isn't free. You're not going to click on it and have to give a credit card number or anything like that. We're doing this because it's part of the Human SOS movement and what we as an organization firmly believe and behave based on. So thanks, everyone. So glad to have everyone this week. We will be back, as always, on Tuesdays. That is our day at 11 a.m. Eastern. And we hope that you'll come and bring others with you. And we will continue addressing different topics related to the Human SOS movement and what we're about, because at the end of the day, we want to help folks really live and work in a way that is sustainable. So take care. Have an amazing rest of your week, and we will see, hopefully, you next week on Tuesday at 11.
And we start talking leadership next week.